So you've built a lean and successful business. You're proud of how efficient it is. You're proud of how well it's working. But now you're hitting a wall. Clients expect more, your team's maxed out, and somehow freedom feels further away and not closer to you. In truth, trying to stay small might be the thing that's holding you back. In this video, I'll break down why growth may not be the problem, it might be the solution to your problems. In fact, there's specific signs that your company has become too big to stay small. They show up structurally, operationally, or financially. For example, if you're running a $10 to $50 million business off of a $3 million operating model, you're going to notice that. Those signs won't be that subtle. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through the 3 conditions where staying small isn't safe anymore. Those are defensive necessity, or building your moat, operational stability, and enterprise value. So when it comes to growth, I often talk, especially in the small and medium-sized business space, I often meet leaders of companies who really want things to stay small and simple. And growth feels intimidating to them. And that's understandable for a lot of reasons, because growth means change. It's by definition a certain kind of change. But the problem is that even though the belief often is that if we can just get to and hold a particular number, things will be fine for forever. The reality is it rarely works quite that way. And so I want to explain when, not always, but when growth is something that you need to do so that you can begin to step forward. The first one has to do with this concept of defense. Interestingly enough, growth can become a defensive strategy. It's a way to protect yourself. It's a way, sometimes people use the word moat in the sense of it becomes very hard to challenge you or compete with you because you've got this competitive moat of some form around you. Part of this has to do with having competitive deterrence. The idea is that if you leave market available to your competition, they'll fill that gap. And what can happen, doesn't always happen, but what can happen is if they fill that gap too much, then they start to become viewed as the resource or the place to go to in that area, and you become smaller and smaller. The most classic example of this, and it's one that's very hard for people to overcome, is the disappearance of many local stores that have had a gap filled by the Walmarts and by Amazons and so on, who've been able to come in and take over certain aspects of their market. Now, this doesn't always happen. There's certain local businesses that are able to maintain their position in that space, but you just want to be aware of that if you give away too much market, then oftentimes people feel like, this other competitor is it's easier to find them, they're more front of mind, it's easier to go to them, they're closer, they're more accessible, they're offering more, there's just more energy around them, and people might want to go there. And that happens. Another part of this has to do with supply chain defense. Ensuring that you have solid access to your supply chain. Something that I often recommend to my clients is that if you have any key product or supply that you need to go to regularly, you want to make sure that you have multiple suppliers in that space. Because if you only have one, we've seen this happen recently with COVID when things would shut down. Companies would struggle to survive. Recently with the war in Ukraine, a friend of mine owns a number of auto dealerships, and the whole electrical harnesses for some of their vehicles were made in Ukraine. Those factories completely shut down. They were no longer able to build those models of cars at all, because everything was based out of these factories in Ukraine. And so now in his case, as an auto dealer, there is a limit to what you can do in that space, but for the manufacturer, having a defense around their supply chain becomes really important so that you don't have single points of failure is really the idea. And that's probably the easiest concept to keep in mind, is to make sure that your supply chain has no single point of failure, and there's always at least 2 ways that you can get all of the things you need. Why this means growth is because to be able to maintain 2 different pathways in your supply chain, you often have to be of a particular size to do that. And so that's why oftentimes when people talk about growth, they imagine this nice curve where you kind of increase by 5 or 10% every year. That doesn't exist. Nobody experiences that. That's something that is only drawn on dry erase boards. It doesn't actually happen anywhere. What growth actually looks like is probably this little curve that goes up, and then you're at the bottom of a step. Then you have a little curve. I guess I could have drawn these more like curves that go up, and then you're at the bottom of a step. And then you have a little curve that goes up, and then you're at the bottom of another step. And so you have this little period where being who you are, doing what you do, you can get some growth out of that. But to get to the next level often requires a larger change. For example, what I'm talking about here is that if you want to really protect yourself competitively, you might really need to expand aggressively, or you might need to expand so that you have the supply chain defense in place. But keep this stair-step concept in mind, because it's really what drives a lot of what I'm talking about, is that oftentimes you discover that survival isn't guaranteed or is less certain at this bottom step, and you need to move up to another step, and that's significant change. The last one, and this is a common one, is revenue diversification. So if you have more than 15%, this is the rule of thumb I use. It's not precise. It can change for your industry. But if you have more than 15% of your revenue coming from any one customer, then that should set off warning signs or warning alerts for you that we need to diversify our revenue. This doesn't mean you give up that customer or you let them buy less from you, but it does mean you need to grow out the rest of your customer portfolio so that this 15%, like if they start to get to 20 or 30%, that you can reduce the total percentage down by growing out the rest of it. The reason for this is if you have one customer and they're giving you 50% of your business, what I often have found is that business leaders will be like, this is great, customer, Acme Corp is coming in and they're just giving us business. It is fantastic. We're now on the gravy train. We don't have to worry about business anymore. And that lasts for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And then all of a sudden, or it could last a little longer, but you don't know. And then at some point, always, Acme Corp will decide, hey, we're going to do something different. Or they go out of business themselves, or they decide to in-house everything. And then boom, 50% of your business is gone. It's very hard to survive a 50% or whatever that number is, a large percentage loss of your revenue base. You can usually survive a 15% loss if they've gotten that large. It may hurt, but you can usually survive it. So that's why you want revenue diversification. But if you're caught in the trap of being too small for the systems that you need to grow, it's time to shift. So christianmuntean.com is my website, and on there I have a lot of resources that help break down some of the systems that you need to help you scale without losing control. Additionally, it provides ways for you to reach out to me directly. That link for my website's in the video description. And while you're here, make sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next video. The next thing that you want to look at is operational stability. So, I mentioned the stair steps. Well, it might be that to go from this step to that one requires a new management team or additional management. Or maybe you need professional staff. And by this, what I'm talking about is people that might be in HR functions, legal functions, R&D type functions, non-billable, non-directly you get accounting in here. You get all of those kind of marketing. Maybe you need to add a layer like that, whether it's 1099ing them or you're hiring them in-house. You realize you need to bring in people that are not directly marketable. They should be helping you leverage everything else you're doing, and you should gain more out of having them than not having them. But initially, to bring them on is this initial cost. Or you want to go for bigger jobs or more jobs, or you want to expand to a new location. There's some initial capital and maybe employees that you need to staff up for. And so any other kind of, geographic or team expansion, any of these things requires a jump in your potential overhead. And so to justify that, to make that make sense, you need to grow financially and grow your revenues in some way. And so just being aware that sometimes if you're staying right here, you can't squeeze anything more out of what you've got. You need to actually grow and change the model that you're working with to a certain degree so that you can grow. And so this has to do with transition size. Transition size strain. This is the strain that you feel. Many of my clients, when I meet them, they're all kind of bunched up at the bottom of a stairway. To them, it feels like a wall that they can't get through. And it's because they're not aware that it's not a wall, it's just a step. But you're going to have to make some significant changes to get up that step. It's not just a natural, gradual transition most of the time. And that sense of strain is often an indication that, oh, maybe we need to grow here, or we need to evaluate or consider growth as part of our solution. The other part is when you're dealing with freedom issues. So this is particularly true for owners who often feel trapped by the businesses that they've built, and they feel trapped by success. They're a slave to success. They can't get away because they got so many good things going on. But even if you're not an owner, but you're an executive on the team, there's often a fear that if we grow, it's just going to increase my workload. And if you grow well, if you grow correctly, that should not happen. Your workload should actually decrease. But oftentimes, if you want freedom, let's say you're an owner or you're on an executive team and you want freedom to be able to think about larger strategic issues and not be so stuck in the weeds, you often need to begin to build out your team and your structures, which requires growth to help justify that and fund that. And then the last major piece of this has to do with career pathways. If you have a great company, it's doing $10 million a year, and you've got a great little team of engineers or whatever kind of company you're in, the reality is the pathway for somebody to have a complete career is going to be pretty limited in that space. And if you want to attract and retain the best people, oftentimes you have to grow the environment that you've created so that there's more of a pathway for you to attract and retain. Otherwise, for some of these smaller companies, what tends to happen is you can begin to attract people that are wanting a place to cut their teeth and to learn and to grow, and you'll get a split of the real motivated folks that are wanting to advance their careers will eventually outgrow you and move on to another company, and you're often left with people that are a little bit less motivated in some way. They're not as driven. At the point that no longer works for you, growth then becomes part of your trajectory, or becomes part of what you should consider, because it gives you that stability internally for your operations. So the last thing is enterprise value. And so this isn't necessarily what everybody's paying attention to, but if you're a business owner and you want to have a valuation of a certain kind, there's a strong tendency in the small, mid-sized business market to have kind of magical valuations of your company. You know, your buddy sold a business for $5 million or $10 million or $30 million, and you feel like, well, my business is better run than my buddy's, so I want to also get $10 million for my business. Unfortunately, buyers don't value businesses like that, and neither do the financiers, the bankers behind those buyers. They also don't value your business in the same way. And so part of what they might be looking for is a certain size and a certain operational capacity in your business. And so if you want to hit a certain value target before you exit, growth might be part of that answer. And that often happens where owners will come to me and they'll say, hey, for me to be able to retire and have the life that I want, I just need an extra $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 in the bank, million in the bank. And I need the business to do that for me, the business sale to do that for me. And so we sit down, we do a valuation of the business, and it's like, well, right now, excluding some of the assets and so on, business might be worth $1 million or $2 million. And so we're going to have to grow an additional $3, $4, $5, $6 million worth of value to get to where you want. But in that, to pursue to hit the number you want, let's say right now you've got a valuation of $3 million, and what you really want is a valuation of $10 million. What I typically do is I figure out on paper what does a $10 million version of you What does that look like in the future? We already know where you're at now, and then we create the path. What needs to be in place? And so this is where you want to work with somebody that understands how valuation is identified and what it looks like in terms of your organizational structure and performance, because then you can map out these $10 million versions, and then you just create a plan for growth to get there. Most of the time, a lot of value comes from cleaning things up internally. That's a significant driver of growth, and it's something that most owners are completely unaware of. But sometimes you actually need external growth as well to be able to hit some of the numbers that you might be looking for. So I've just broken down how the instinct to stay small actually can create fragility, and why strategic growth may be the real key for you to build a resilient business. Staying small might feel safer, but in today's market, it can often be the riskiest move of all. What you need is a clear strategic path forward, and that's exactly where we're headed next. So if your company is sitting in that $10 to $50 million range, the three growth conditions that we covered, defense, stability, and enterprise value, tell you exactly when growth becomes a requirement, not a preference. In the next video, I'll show you how to scale without losing control.